Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
Let's go! Welcome everybody, episode number 2 of Cageside with John Morgan. I am your host, Eric McMahon. Now, last week, episode number 1, we still went over what the high kick heard around the world and just the ramifications of that. We also did a preview, a deep dive into the card that just happened this weekend, which was that historic night in Paris. Also discussed Demetrius Johnson and why we both believe he is the flyweight GOAT. Now you can go ahead and give us a look, give us a listen, either grindcitymedia.com, YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Now go ahead, give us a click, give us a like, give us a review, give us a follow. We always appreciate that. Now, without further ado, I want to bring in the man whose name is on the marquee. He is the first question guy, John Morgan. John, what's up, bud?
Oh, not much, man. Fantastic event, like you said, man. Historic weekend in Paris. The first time the UFC had ever been there. For people that don't know, MMA wasn't legal there for years. It took a long time for it to be legalized in the country. It was the first time the UFC got there. And, man, did the crowd show up, man. It bled through on the television screens, on the computers, wherever you were streaming ESPN Plus, man. The crowd showed up. The French fighters showed up, man. It was just a perfect recipe, a huge night for the UFC. It's just always cool when you see the UFC in a new place for the first time. You see fans who are going to a UFC event for their first time. I mean, that's when you get converted. You know, maybe you're a casual fan, but you step in the building. You can't deny what a great job the UFC does with their live events. And then you just go, man, this is my jam. This is what I do. And we got to see it this past weekend. It was incredible.
Now, it's kind of funny. I wanted to bring this up because, a couple weeks ago, UFC 278, Salt Lake, enormous crowd on fire. And we just said the crowd there, just what a shout out to that crowd. And I tell everybody, it's fun to watch a fight at home, especially if you're watching with somebody who's very knowledgeable about the sport. It's really, really fun. But when you're in live, like you just said, you get converted. But do we have this like crowd battles going now? Do you think that's a thing? Like UFC 278, like Paris is like, not to be outdone, Salt Lake City. We can go back. Houston's been crazy. Phoenix before that was crazy. And now Paris was crazy. Do you think these events are just that fun, or is there a little thing going on there?
I think it's just the cultures, man, to be honest with you. I mean, wait till we get back to Brazil, man. It's been a while because of the pandemic and all that. The Brazilian crowd is always amazing. Listen, not that far from now, Madison Square Garden in November, man. The New York crowd's always – those are some of my most fun press conferences to attend, to be honest with you, because the crowd's out there like heckling and yelling at the fighters. It's just a different vibe. I just think it's that different energy of those cities. And look, Cerebral, the Frenchman who won in the main event, we'll talk about that, of course, but he even said it on the mic afterwards. He said, look, I don't think a lot of people expected this out of French fans. I don't think they expected this type of energy. You don't know what you're going to get, but man, they brought it. They brought it. And listen, you're right. Live events are fun. There's something about mixed martial arts. So listen, to be honest with you, watching on television is a phenomenal experience. That's where you get the replays and the different camera angles. And even when you're at a UFC event live, you're going to end up looking up at the screens a little bit and watching replay. But it's the energy in that building, right? I mean, the UFC, first of all, does a great job of just keeping the music pumping and the energy and all that. DJ AL3, making it like a club experience. That's part of fun. But there's also something about when those moments happen and you've got this crowd of people around you who all love the sport the way you do, and you're just high-fiving and going, oh, man, did you see that? Or, maybe you're talking a little bit of smack to somebody that's cheering for the other fighter. There's just a different energy when you can just be like turned to a bunch of group of strangers around you and everybody's just like, oh, my God. So, listen, if you're an MMA fan and you haven't gone to a live event, I always recommend go to a live event. I mean, obviously the UFC is the highest of the food chain. I think live events of all kinds are fun of MMA, but the UFC does it right. It's worth it. It'll change your experience with the sport, man. It's a lot of fun.
And when you hear that smack of the punch against a face or against a body, a kick to the leg, you don't understand. Television does it justice, but not like a live event. That is John Morgan. You can follow him on Twitter at JohnMorgan_MMA. I'm Eric McMahon. Follow me at, hey, I got one follower, E_MacLife. So let's just move on. Like we said, that historic card in Paris just got regulated, which was, pretty exciting thing. Cyril gone. main events versus the one-hitter quitter, Tai Tuivasa. What a performance by Ciryl Gane. Overcomes adversity, gets knocked down, comes back up. John, take it from there.
Amazing performance, and then was able to rock Tai Tuivasa on the feet and get the third-round knockout with just a barrage of punches. I mean, phenomenal performance for a number of reasons. I mean, listen, Ciryl Gane was a huge favorite coming in. I mean, there was a reason why. He's taller, he's longer, he's faster, all those reasons, But you thought, okay, but if Tai Tuivasa connects, that's going to be a problem. So this was one of those ones where you kind of knew who the right guy was to win, but you always know Tai, one shot is all it takes. That can change everything, and that's what made it fun. It's just kind of like, ooh, what if he gets caught? Well, guess what? He got caught. And so you think, oh, there it was. And he survived it, and he got back up. And he even said afterwards, he's like, look, man, he rocked me, but I knew I had to be a warrior. I got back on my feet, and I went back to work and immediately started throwing again. Immediately went to the body and delivered some damage. So I think this was a phenomenal performance for Ciryl Gane for a number of reasons. I mean, Ciryl Gane is a fantastic athlete. He's kind of a quiet guy. He's not a big trash talker by any stretch of the imagination. So in his run up to the top of the division, former interim champ, I don't think he had like a huge kind of fan charge behind him because he just, again, guys that talk trash, guys that seem a little bit more relatable, sometimes they get a few more. And he wasn't having those type of performances. But here, on a historic night, he's a Frenchman. He's in his home country. I mean, he wants to deliver for everybody, and he's tested. And I always say that, in some ways, you want guys to be dominant. You want to win. Look at a guy like Khamzat Chimaev that was just, walking through people and you're like, wow, that guy is good. But to me, the performances that mean the most are like the one Khamzat had against Gilbert Burns, where he got tested and you got to see the heart a little. What happens when this guy gets in trouble? What happens when his back's against the wall? And we saw that from Ciryl Gane. He got tested. He got hurt. He got back up and he went to work and he got the third-round knockout. And now nothing but big fights ahead for him. I mean, sent the French crowd home, cheering, and now a big fight on the horizon. Did break his hand in the performance, so he's going to be sidelined for a little bit. But to me, this was a phenomenal performance for Ciryl Gane.
And you could just show how educated of a fighter he really is. I mean, he invested in the body. He invested it in the first round, in the second round, and then it paid huge dividends in the third round.
Yeah, and a lot of people, it's a subtle art, right? Because you do have to invest in the body shots. It's like, doing damage to the legs. It's, you think about it, okay, the knockout comes from a big shot to the head, but sometimes those other things, if I use low kicks to damage an opponent's legs, now they're not quite as mobile. If I use body shots, that takes energy out of them. And not only does it take energy out of them, as they start to hurt a little bit, that guard will drop down a little bit because, when you come out there, hands high, protect the chin, right? But as you keep getting ripped to the body, now your hands start dropping a little bit because you don't want to keep getting there. If you get hit in the liver, I mean, it can put you out, right? Your body just freezes up. So you start dropping the hands a little bit to protect those body shots, and that's when the damage comes back up top. It slowed Tai Tuivasa down. That was, I guess that's probably one of Tai's weaknesses. That was a big question. Is if this thing goes late, can Tai continue to go? And to his credit, Tai Tuivasa, man, he's still as fun as ever. It's not like his stock dropped at all. I mean, who doesn't want to see Tai Tuivasa fight? I mean, he had 5 knockouts in a row. He almost got a 6th one here. He gets hurt and then, man, the respect between the two afterwards, I love that as well, man. That's, to me, and it may seem silly, but it's one of my favorite things about this sport is that you have two guys that go in there that are trying to take each other's heads off, right? And then it wraps up, and what do? They go hug each other, and they say, thank you, man. That was amazing. I appreciate you doing that for me, man. And that's just, to me, that's the best part about the sport. I know bad bloods and rivalries and all that kind of fuel things, but I love seeing that respect afterwards. These two guys had it. Like I said, neither man's stock dropped. It was just an awesome debut in Paris for the UFC.
Well, you kind of took my segue there because I didn't want to dive into it. It did not hurt Tai Tuivasa's stock at all. If anything, it made him more of a crowd favorite, in my opinion. If we look back, I believe this was in the second round. He took a hellacious head kick. I mean, no defense, shin to jaw. Whether he was hurt or he was playing a little bit of possum, he coaxed Ciryl Gane to come on in, and then he just throws for the fences. Was he hurt there in that second with that head kick?
I don't know. That was such a great moment. I think he was kind of faking it a little bit. The moment you're talking about is amazing. He gets hit. He kind of wobbles back a little bit like he's stunned, and as Ciryl Gane starts to move forward. And to Cyril's credit, he didn't overcommit because if he had, he'd gotten caught because just as Gane comes forward, it unleashes the huge right hand. It didn't hit, but if it had, it would have been a problem. Oh, man, the guy is just fun, man. His pre-fight interviews are fun. His fighting style is fun. I mean, everything about Tai Tuivasa is fun. And he didn't get to do the shoey, of course. Everybody loves the celebration where he takes the shoe and pours the beer in it and slams it. He didn't get to do that, but he still delivered a great fight. And people are still going to want to tune in and watch Tai Tuivasa fight. I mean, whoever they match him up with next, you're going to want to tune in.
When he's on the card, I will be watching. Absolutely. Now, going back into how tactical Ciryl Gane was for this fight, the one thing that stuck out to me is there was never a moment, to your just credit, you just say he did not overcommit himself. There was never a moment in that fight that he was not cerebral in his attack or in his defenses. If you even look at that huge shot that dropped him, it bounced off his arm first. It was half arm, half head that fist connected to. So he was so conscious, and he even said that was the hardest striker he has gone against. Little shade at Francis Ngannou there?
Maybe so. Well, listen, that's just who Tai is. Tai dropped. Look, he went 5 rounds with Francis Ngannou, and he didn't get dropped like that. So, it's not shade if it's true, right? And Francis didn't connect with them. But you're so right. Cerebral fighter, smart. And I think, listen, to be honest with you, I think maybe that's the reason he didn't have the massive fan base coming in, because he's very tactical in the way he fights, right? He's going to stay away. He's going to manage the distance right. He's going to land at range. He's not just going to put his head down and throw like maybe Tai Tuivasa will sometimes, which puts you in danger. But if you connect, you win. So he's a very tactical, very smart fighter, patient in what he does. But again, got tested and came back and rallied, and that's why I think this was so cool. And what a moment for him. I mean, that's a moment. I was talking to him and his coach, Fernando Lopez, before this, and I said, listen, I know you guys have a tense week. You know what I mean? I know the expectations are heavy on you. I know that this is a big fight. I know that any fight week is stressful, right? But this is probably extra so because you want to deliver. But I hope that you guys can take a moment as you're walking in and just soak in what you see and appreciate it, because this is history. You guys are at the top of the bill of the very first UFC card in a place that you guys call home, that you started training in a sport when it wasn't even legal in your home country, but you invested in it and you said, this is my passion, this is my future, and it wasn't even legal, but you kept doing it, and now it's here, and you guys are at the top of the bill. I hope you can take a second and soak that in. And it looked like, I think they did a little bit. I think they got a chance to appreciate the moment, and it's a big one for them.
Now, just like any good event, it doesn't come without some controversy. Okay, now, I noticed this in the moment. What you know about me is I'm a licensed referee. I have refereed title fights for CFFC. I've refereed probably 1,000 fights, and I'm still an active referee to this point. In that third round, when the knockout came, there was a clear, not subjectively, there was a clear shot to the back of the head. So much that Dos Anjos even mentioned it after the fight, because he was still throwing a little shade. He thought he got hit in the back of the head by Ciryl Gane as well. Now, do you think that was intentional, not intentional? I want to hear it from you. I'll give you my ref's opinion here in a second, but I just want to hear it from you.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, I definitely saw this live as it happened as well, right? And it, as you said, the finishing sequence, basically he's throwing punches and Ciryl throws a hammer fist as they're standing. It kind of lands to the back of that. Now, I think you're right about one thing. There's no question it landed to the area that is deemed illegal. You're not to strike to the back of the head. Obviously, there's a lot of nerves and sensitive things there, which is why that's illegal. The question to me, though, is intent. And I'll be honest with you, I don't love necessarily the way that we interpret the rules sometimes. Obviously with low blows and things like that, it's written in there if it's an intentional foul. I mean, I do not think that Ciryl Gane in that moment said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hit this dude in an illegal spot. I think what happened was you got two bodies moving in very quick fashion, and you're flurrying and punches being thrown, and that's kind of just the part of the head that was presented at that moment. So to me, I didn't see the intent there, and I've seen it afterwards. I see what Junior Dos Santos said. Now, obviously, let's remember, Junior Dos Santos got caught with a shot from Ciryl Gane that he thought was illegal as well. So and Junior Dos Santos is one of the nicest dudes on the planet, so I'm not saying he's out here talking trash, but you always got to consider somebody's motivation, right? What is their opinion? What is it motivated by? And, of course, Junior Dos Santos caught that shot from Ciryl Gane that he felt was illegal that wasn't deemed that way. So I think that's why Junior is pointing out. But I would not have called that illegal. I would not have, stopped the sequence. And you can certainly speak to this because I've never had to be in that situation. My God, what a difficult position that would have been for the referee, who was a phenomenal referee. Mark Goddard, obviously one of the best in the business. If anybody felt there was a need to do it. Mark Goddard does not care. He will stop and do it. But from my point of view, I didn't see the intent as so much as just as Tai Tuivasa is moving his head around and trying to recover and the whole bodies are flailing, that it was kind of incidental in nature and it wasn't targeted in nature. And for that reason, I had no issue with no call being made and the fight ending right there.
I think this may be the first time we've disagreed in 1 1/4 episodes so far. So who knows? Maybe this is a foreshadowing of what's to come. Some good discussion here. But as a referee, I got to call it like I see it. Now, do I think it was 100% malicious? I think we got to realize what's intent and what is malicious intent. I think those are two separate things. The intent, to me, as a trained licensed referee, there was 100% intent. Whether it was malicious or not, I don't think it was malicious. I think it happened. Somebody gets caught up in the moment. To your point, he sees a target and he attacks. But he uncorks with this straight right hand that definitely hurts Tai Tuivasa. Hurts him so bad that he bends at the waist and gets rocked. To that point, you see Cyril Gahn cocking back to throw another punch, and then the target isn't there. And you see him change his directory to take it from a punch to a hammer fist. In that moment, that is intent. And then he swings. So the difference is it malicious intent? I don't think the intent was malicious. I think caught up in the moment. He's going 100 miles an hour. It's hard to stop attack mode. It is tremendously hard, but it doesn't make it illegal. It was clearly illegal. Now, Mark Goddard is put in the toughest spot possible there. He is in a horrendous spot. One, the punch was a devastating punch that hurt him already. The foul happened, the clear foul. We can't say it was that there's no subjectivity there. It was a clear foul. And then that hurts. Whatever, what may have been the damage of that, who knows? It's not like Tai Tuivasa complained about it. But after that shot, then a vicious uppercut puts him down. And this all happens in the span of what? About a second and a half? So Mark Goddard, there's no good place for Mark Goddard to be there. As a referee, I don't even know in the moment if I would have had the wherewithal to stop that and say illegal, because it was bam, 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 and then the crushing uppercut is what eventually put him down. And at that point, you have to protect the fighter. The protect is to protect Tai Tuivasa from taking any more punishment, which Mark Goddard did, calls off the fight over. Win. It's a win. It's a knockout. Cyril Gahn. Tough spot, but one of those 3 shots was definitely illegal.
Yeah, you're right. You are right about that. As you lay out your case there, I do see what you're saying. It'll be interesting. I don't know if Mark Goddard, I haven't seen the officials list for UFC 279 in Las Vegas. If he's here this week, I'll try to follow up with him and get his thoughts on it. It would be a very difficult position, right? Because even if the referee, let's say you stop it right there and you say, hold on, time, illegal blow right there. Tai was hurt in that moment. So how do you take away the legal blows from the illegal blows? Now are we talking about just calling the fight off and it's a no contest? Because again, and again, that's where I say intent. Did he intend to hit that part of the head? I don't think. To me, it was almost just an accidental contact. But I see what you're saying in terms of he did change the trajectory of the punch to make it. So that's where the intent comes in. It's a tough one, man. I guess I'm glad nothing was called, because I mean that would have been some controversy to say the least. But Mark Goddard's not thinking about that. Listen, Mark Goddard, one of the finest in the game. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. You know what I mean? He's just trying to call it as he sees it. And I'll be interested to get his take on it. To me, I think, Tai was already hurt. I don't think that was the blow that ultimately befell him. But you are right. It was illegal. It did land to an illegal area. So, gray area?
Definitely, yeah. Okay, we'll end with gray area, and at the end of the day, Mark Goddard did the right thing. He protected Tai Tuivasa. He was clearly hurt. Whether that strike happened or not, we saw the road this was going down. The body was devastated, and now the head was devastated at that point. So, I just needed to tap into that, and I don't like that there's that little bit of controversy off of such a spectacular performance.
Yeah, it is a shame. Talking about what a great performance it was, I guess if you could change one thing, that would be it. So there would be no controversy whatsoever. There would be no reason to doubt or whatever. But I guess that's MMA, right? Nothing's ever perfect in this chaotic sport, man. It's crazy as it gets.
And that's why we love it. So what is next for Cyril Gane? I mean, obviously, Francis Ngannou's on the shelf. Well, first of all, let's start there. What the heck is going on with Francis Ngannou right now? What is his status?
Yeah, he's still recovering from knee surgery, so he said he's not quite 100% yet, not feeling back to it. He's targeting the beginning of the year maybe, so, looking at maybe January before he can actually turn. So basically, he's just not 100% yet, and he doesn't want to go in there at less than 100%. Now, there's
contract negotiation, so is it where we at with that? Okay.
There's part of that as well. That needs to happen as well because Francis, listen, he wants to get it into his contract that he can box. He's even talking about discussion of simply walking away from the UFC, and he believes that one more fight would fulfill his obligation to the UFC. There's some legal gray area there as well as how that would work out. And there's some discussions to be had. He'd like to work with the UFC to do it. I mean, he recognizes what great promoters they are, similar to the way the UFC worked with Conor McGregor when he fought Floyd Mayweather. Francis Ngannou would like to see that as well. But UFC President Dana White has kind of made it clear. And I'll be honest with you. This is one thing that I'm torn on with Francis Ngannou, right? Because if the guy can go out there and get a $30 million payday to go fight Tyson Fury or somebody along those lines, how do you hold him back from doing that? Like, that's what prize fighting is all about. But as you well know, it is two entirely different sports, man. And to me, an elite level mixed martial artist fighting an elite level boxer will never beat them in boxing, but vice versa. The elite level boxer will never come in and beat elite level mixed martial artists in mixed martial arts. So on the one hand, I don't want to see it happen because I think it's a tough assignment for Francis Ngannou, but the guy's going to get paid. You want to see the guy go get paid. So anyway, all that's got to work out. So to your point right now with Francis Ngannou, he's just still on the shelf right now. The knee is still recovering, and there are contract negotiations to be had as well.
So what's next for Cyril Gane right now? Obviously, we have the mythical creature that is Jon Jones out there. Is that a logical next step?
That's what made this fight so difficult to kind of, I guess, I don't want to say get excited about. I mean, Cyril, the debut in Paris is amazing. Tied to Avas is fun, but there is no clear next. I mean, Curtis Blaydes right now, he said, I got next. That makes sense. Curtis Blaydes right now sitting at number 4 in the rankings. Cyril Gane, number 1. I mean, that's a fight that definitely makes sense. It's all going to come down to timing. So Jon Jones, the most dominant champion in UFC history, light heavyweight champ for years and years and years, has made his intentions clear. He's bulking up, and he is bulking up. He is getting big to make his debut at heavyweight. Now, he wants to come in and fight for a title. Now, all the discussion is it looks like in December, it'll be Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic for an interim heavyweight title with Francis Ngannou still sidelined. Which makes sense. I think if Jon Jones, with all he's done at light heavyweight, moving up to heavyweight, even though he hasn't fought in the division, I'll be honest with you, I think everything that he's done at 205 pounds merits him having a title shot in the heavyweight division right away. So an interim belt with him and Stipe. Stipe has the record for most title defenses in UFC heavyweight history. That'd be a great fight. It'd be a big money fight. And then the winner hopefully would fight Francis Ngannou. But again, if they fight in December, the winner of that fight might not want to fight again until June or July. So now if you're Francis Ngannou, do you really want to wait till June or July? So maybe it could be enough for Cyril Gane if that hand is healed up and the break is there that he can jump. It's murky right now. And I hate to say that, but there's not a lot of clear fights, but it all boils down to timing. It boils down to the timing of Francis Ngannou's recovery and when he wants to fight. It boils down to, does Jon Jones and Stipe actually happen in December? So, and again, Francis looked incredible, but let's not forget, it was January of last year that he lost to Francis Ngannou. So is the public appetite there? I don't know. I'm not sure. And that's the crazy thing about this sport, Eric, right? It doesn't just come down to, it's not a playoff bracket where you win and you automatically move on, right? The UFC is constantly thinking, what's going to move the needle? What's going to sell pay-per-view buys? What's going to get it done? Where does that factor in? So I hate to say it, but there's no clear path right now for me. I think the Curtis Blaydes fight does make a lot of sense, especially if you don't want to sit around and wait. If you're Cyril Gane, you just had a great performance. I think you're looking, if you're waiting for the winner of the next fight, I mean, you're looking till at least July, maybe past that. I think you're going to have another fight. So to me, if I'm guessing, I think the Blaydes fight ends up happening at some point.
Which he kind of shut down in the moment, but you're right with the murkiness. But let's go back to not another clear path. That co-main event led no clear path. But to me, this was the fight that I was most excited about on the card. These are two fighters that I just love watching, Marvin Vettori and Robert Whittaker. And what came away from that fight is who the clear number 2 in the division was. And that was Robert Whittaker, who looked amazing. Arguably lost that first round on one of the 3 judges. They gave Vettori that first round, but then he just ran the table from there and looked amazing while doing it.
Robert Whittaker is incredible, and unfortunately, the setbacks to Israel Adesanya maybe have lowered his stock a little bit, but you can't deny just how dang good he is. And he dominated Martin Vettori, who I agree, man. I'm a big Martin Vettori fan. I mean, hot-tempered Italian. He's always going to go out there with something to say. I love him, but he got dominated in rounds 2 and 3, and I mean, he clearly knew it at the end of that fight. You could see the frustration in his face, just couldn't get anything going. But you're in a difficult position. So we just talked about it, and it's funny. You're absolutely right. No clear picture here either, and that was, to me, the only issue with this card coming in is there's no clear stakes for what comes next. It's more about just holding on to your position, and that's what Robert Whittaker did here. In the sport of mixed martial arts, in the UFC especially, just history has shown us if you go 0-2 against a champion, it's really, really hard to get a third fight with him, and that's where Robert Whittaker stands right now. He's 0-2 against Israel Adesanya. So I think the first step for Robert Whittaker is you go buy yourself an Alex Pereira t-shirt. You put that on when he's fighting in Israel Adesanya. You become a big Alex Pereira fan when they fight in Madison Square Garden in November, because if Alex Pereira wins, that opens things up, because now Robert Whittaker has not faced Alex, and now you got a new champion, and now you got a fresh matchup, and that's easy. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for him to get a third fight with Israel Adesanya, but I will say this, and Robert Whittaker, credit to him, because he was asked, hey, what's next for you? And he said, look, I want to move forward. I'd like to fight Israel Adesanya again, but he understands that may not be next. He knows that I've got to just make it clear that I will beat everybody in the division, because if I beat everybody in the division, they have to come back to me, whether they want to or not, whether they think I deserve it or not, they have to come back to me. And so it looks like, there may be a UFC event in Australia around February or so is what we're hearing. He's certainly hearing that as well, and he'd love to fight in his backyard. So it looks like that'll happen. I just think who the opponent is going to be will have a lot to do with what happens in November when Israel Adesanya faces Alex Pereira, because if Izzy wins, I don't think you go third fight with Whittaker right away. And look, Robert's talked about, hey, maybe I'll move up to 205 pounds. Maybe I'll look at some challenges there. So the clearer path for him is like I said, start cheering for Alex Pereira in November. Put your T-shirt on and be a fan on that night, and hope he knocks Israel Adesanya out.
Well, I mean, truth be told, I think if any performance does warrant a third shot, it was that performance this weekend. And I'm going to look at it from my, let's call it, me and you are dorky nerds about this sport. We have a lot of the ins and outs and we look at it, but let's look at how the gap closed too. That first fight, he got outclassed by Izzy. That second fight, he still to this day believes he won it. So that gap obviously closed tremendously between 1 and 2. What could happen at number 3? I mean, if I was that marketing machine behind the UFC and I decided to make that fight, that's the avenue I would be playing. And if I'm Robert Whittaker, that's what I truly believe.
Yeah, it's just, again, it's all about moving the needle. But you're right, you could present it that way. I think what you do is, if you do end up going with a third fight, I think doing it in Australia wouldn't be bad, right? Because now you're talking about 2 of the region's biggest stars. Obviously, you've got Israel Adesanya hailing from New Zealand as well. So maybe you go down there and you put them in a stadium. I mean, I think that the fans would say, hey, maybe we've seen this matchup twice before, but these are our guys. I want to watch them compete, and I think you could sell out a big venue down there. Maybe from a pay-per-view perspective, you'd need another title fight to be the main event. Maybe that's your co-main event, even though Israel Adesanya is one of the biggest stars in the sport right now, even though Robert Whittaker, of course, is a star in his own right. Maybe you'd need something else just to make sure that people want to buy it when it is fight number 3. But listen, they do have a nice rivalry together. They do have nice respect for each other. They are both great fighters. I'm not ruling it out, and I'm not saying I wouldn't tune in for it either. I'm just saying, history has shown it's tough to get that third fight. Basically, you got to make sure there's no other options on the table. So the easiest path is, again, if Alex Pereira can become UFC champion, that really opens up the floodgates for Robert Whittaker to get a title shot next. Absolutely.
Now, with this card being in Paris, there was not a lot there. There was a lot of foreign fighters on this card, which a lot of our North American audience got to see for the first time. So our first ever Caesar Sportbook prospect to watch. Give us a prospect to watch that came off that UFC Paris card.
Well, listen, I think a couple people really made statements. All right, Nasruddin Imavov, who a lot of people might not be familiar with, but Dagestani-born, now lives and trains in France. That fight against Joaquin Buckley was originally on the prelims. It got moved up to the main card the day before, which I thought was a brilliant decision. I was surprised it was on the prelims to begin with, and he put in a great performance against Joaquin Buckley. So Nasruddin Imavov is a guy that I think really has some talent. He's somebody worth watching. And listen, I'll give you a couple other names as well. Nathaniel Wood moved up to featherweight for the second consecutive time. He looked phenomenal against Charles Jourdain. You had Abus Magomedov, whose his debut, I should say, in the UFC was delayed for years due to some injuries, due to some visa issues, due to some other things. He comes in and gets a 19-second knockout and a $50,000 performance bonus. I mean, he looked great. Some names on there, and that's the thing about this is keeping an eye on that. I mean, you talk about prospects, you keep an eye on these performances because I'm telling you right now, especially when you're talking about wagering now. It's one thing just to be a fan and to say, I want to see the rise of these guys. But when you watch these prelim fighters and these prospects, a lot of times you can find betting lines that don't accurately reflect the talents because people don't actually know how good these guys are yet. So always worth keeping an eye on the undercard because you might be able to make a little money on them later down the line.
All right, I've been waiting to get to this. So we got our recap done. Recap is done. Right. And I've just been sitting on this, and I've been sitting on it since you were like, hey, 5-round fight with, Khamzat and Diaz. You never know. And then it just got me turning and turning and turning. UFC 279 this Saturday, the Stockton boy, Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev. I before was like, are they setting them up? Now I am pumped. You are right. The machine started turning, man.
I told you, man. They first announced the fight. Everybody says, "Oh, they're just going to get Nate Diaz crushed." But then you start watching the preview packages and the countdown shows and all that, and it's true. Listen, main event this week, it's exciting. And what's funny is I was out the other night at my kid's birthday party. Well, it's not my kid's birthday party. It was a birthday party my kid was at, but it was at the Dave & Buster's. We were there, and as soon as I walk up to the bartender to get myself a frosty beverage, he just looks at me and he goes, dude, talk to me about Khamzat and Nate Diaz. He obviously recognized me. He's obviously an MMA fan. And I'll tell you what I told him is that, look, the funny thing about this fight, UFC 279, is Khamzat Chimaev may come out there and absolutely destroy Nate Diaz. It is entirely possible. Khamzat is that skilled. He's that talented. He's that good. He may come in there and absolutely just steamroll Nate Diaz. But he might not. And if he doesn't get him out of there early, if this thing goes past round 1, if this thing goes past round 2, the longer this thing goes, Nate Diaz doesn't stop. I mean, he said, it's a funny line, but it's so true. He's like, if you're going to kill me, you're going to have to kill me. I'm like, hey, what does that mean? But it's so true. Like, he's not going to stop.
Kill or be killed, homie.
That's it. If you don't get him out of there early, the longer it goes, what happens if that Khamzat Chimaev aggression starts costing him energy, and all of a sudden he's slowing down a little bit, and Nate's not slowing down, and now Nate starts touching you up a little bit. And look, a lot of it, we're focusing on the striking, right? Because, Khamzat is powerful. Nate, you don't think of as having that one-hitter-quitter type power, but he's a volume striker. He'll take damage. Blood will be streaming down his face. He'll be cut up, busted up. He's going to keep moving forward. He's going to keep throwing shots. But let's not forget about the grappling aspect of this as well, because Khamzat Chimaev is a phenomenal grappler. I mean, next level chain wrestling, aggression, will pick you up, walk you over to UFC President Dana White, slam you down on the ground right there. So, he's great. But Nate Diaz has got amazing jiu-jitsu as well. What we've come to think of Nate really more as that kind of volume boxer over time. As his career started off, we really thought of him as that submission artist, right? The triangle choke is, never forget.
Double birds in the air.
Double birds in the air as he's locking in the triangle. So there's options there as well. So listen, ultimately, I do believe that Khamzat Chimaev is probably going to win this fight. This dude is the real deal. He's not hype. He's substance. And I think he's going to go out there and show it. But this is Nate Diaz, and if you don't get him out of there early, the longer you leave him in there, things can happen. This is a fist fight, and he's not going away. He's going to be there. So I'm excited for this one. I'm excited.
Let's take that minus 1150 on Khamzat. Let's just throw it out the window right now, because remember the last time, Nate, first of all, minus 1150, I've never seen this in a main event. That's insanity, and I can't say I disagree with it because for everything you just outlined. But do you remember the last time Nate Diaz was a massive underdog, not only in the betting lines, but with like the media and the fans drinking that McGregor soda? And then he ain't surprised, mother effer. He ain't surprised.
He's got the ability to do that. Again, like I said, you talk about minus 1150. I'm not laying 1150 on anybody in a mixed martial arts fight. I'm just being honest with you. To me, this sport is too volatile. And as you know, it's crazy. Things go on. What if Khamzat goes out there and I don't know, a knee twist or something like that. That's a TKO loss. You know what I mean? It's not like a regular sport where injury, you get pulled out, we'll put in your replacement. No, you just lost the fight. So to put down $11.50 to win back $100, I'm not doing it on anybody in any mixed martial arts fight. Just because
we don't call that smart. That's not smart money.
No, but now, when there are fights like that, if you do want to financially back Khamzat, there's ways to look at it. Now you start looking at round props, you start looking at methods of finish. There's ways to make it a more affordable wager. But to me, the public, I'll be honest, it's just you got to look for things like that because anything can happen. And look, if you want to have a little fun, maybe just throw a little couple bucks down on Nate Diaz, and
minus 750, or was he plus 750? Plus 750.
Listen,
$100 to win $750.
You don't go crazy.
It's very possible.
Don't bet the mortgage on it or anything, you know what I mean? But you want to throw down a little bit to have some fun with the underdog. Who knows?
Yeah, Mrs. McMahon would be pissed if I bet the mortgage on that. Okay, so listen, I'm pumped for this. Nate Diaz, he's going to come out. He's going to be talking smack. He's going to be pointing at him. He's going to be throwing some 1-2s, adding a Stockton slap in there somewhere. And I don't know if the other gangster across the way, how he's going to react to that. You never know because Nate Diaz gets you out of your style that way as well, right? He makes you just that forceful aggression, which then gets you gas, which then turns up the volume punching. Who knows, man? I wasn't excited about this until you talked to me last week, and now I am pumped.
Well, listen, and let's not look. All the pressure's on Khamzat Chimaev, right? He's the guy. He's the one that's been named as the future champion, the superstar. He's the one that's got to go out there, right? So for Khamzat, I don't even think it's good enough to win. I could just go hold the guy down and wrestle him to it. No, that's not good enough. You got to go destroy it. I mean, listen, you and I saw it differently, but we talked about it. There was criticism of Khamzat Chimaev after the fight with Gilbert Burns. We both thought it was an incredible performance against one of the top contenders in the division, but a lot of people are like, I thought Khamzat was the guy that just tore through everybody. I thought he was the guy that just the destroyer of men. This guy looks like he's normal to me. You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, he just beat one of the best in the game. So listen, does the pressure get to him a little bit? Hey, and listen, there's little other birdies talking too. They're like, hey man, Darren Till, he's been hanging out with Darren Till. What kind of influence is Darren Till? Darren Till likes to go have a good time. Darren Till likes to be out at the clubs. And, is he leading Khamzat down that lifestyle? Who knows? Again, that's what makes this fight interesting because I'm telling you, Khamzat could absolutely wreck Nate Diaz in the first round. It could absolutely happen. But what if it doesn't?
I love that. But what if he doesn't? Now, okay, so co-main event, let's look at a guy who may have fallen deeper than pretty much anybody I can remember right now. And on top of the division, he wanted his shot at McGregor. He wanted his shot at Nurmagomedov. Just they never materialized. Just pure bad luck. Came off incredible performances against Anthony Pettis. And now he's lost 4 of his last 5, which is Tony Ferguson. And he gets the co-main event spot. What's to make of Tony right now? Is we know he's kind of out there, but is this a walk-off fight from him? Does he want to keep fighting? I don't know where to go with this co-main event spot versus him versus Lee. I can't even pronounce. I'm sorry, I'm messing up his name, but I don't want to do him injustice. But where does this fight go?
Yeah, for Li Jingliang, but if you just want to call him the Leech, a lot of people have trouble with that.
The Leech,
call him
okay.
The Leech. We all know what you're talking about. But listen, let me preface this by saying I love Tony Ferguson. I love El Kukui, man. I mean, his personality, his style. He's got one of the best walk-in songs in the game. I love.
He wears his breakdancing gloves everywhere.
Come on, man. You can't beat Tony Ferguson. But
he comes out to breakdancing music.
It's amazing. But this is a big spot for him. Now listen, first of all, let's look at the losses, okay? You're absolutely right about the losses, but let's talk about it. Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, Michael Chandler. I mean, you're talking about the top of the division, the uncrowned champion among one of them. Elite level fights. But
he was KO'd in 4 of those 5, though. He was KO'd, and that just gives me a little worry because to you, El Kukui, I have rolled with this guy since The Ultimate Fighter, man. I am a huge fan, and that just worries me, man. And I don't like seeing people, especially, a front kick to the face, Michael Chandler, horrendous knockout. It kind of scares me, truth be told.
Well, I think that's the biggest concern, right? I mean, that knockout was in May. It wasn't all that long ago, right? And it was a vicious knockout, but take that knockout out of it, and what did you think about up to that point? Tony Ferguson was looking good in that fight, right? You're like, okay, Tony Ferguson's back. I love to see this. and then he just got absolutely clipped and devastated by that front kick. Listen, Tony Ferguson in the meantime has gone and, trained at some different gyms and looking at different looks. I mean, this man is a lifelong martial artist. He is committed to getting better, but there's no question about it, Eric. This is a big moment for him. I think we're going to get a lot of answers on Saturday night about the future of Tony Ferguson, because Li Jingliang is, first of all, Li Jingliang is great as well. Like the guy doesn't speak a lick of English, but for some reason, like his energy is just enthusiastic. Like he's always got this big smile, and he's always in a great mood, and he fights fun, and he's proud to represent China, obviously, and he's been around the game. He's given us some highlights, both good and bad over the years. But here's the difference: is that we named off those names and we said very, very elite of the division. Li Jingliang is a fantastic fighter. He's not a top contender, former champion. He's somebody that you got to get through. I hate to use the term gatekeeper because people tend to think that has a negative connotation, but it's just like you've got to beat guys like Li Jingliang if you want to be in the elite in the division. So I think we're going to know a lot about Tony Ferguson and where he stands. I wish nothing but the best for him. Are his championship days behind him? Maybe, and it's a damn shame that the way things worked out, because he had some unfortunate circumstances you mentioned along the way and never quite got to the height that he could have. But this is a big moment for Tony Ferguson. I'm not ready to write him off yet. And again, I preface all that with saying I'm a big Tony Ferguson fan, so maybe I'm not letting go as quickly as I should, but I'm not ready to write him off just yet. But there's no question about it. Saturday night is a very, very important night for him in terms of what we think about Tony Ferguson moving forward.
All right, Kevin Holland, Daniel Rodriguez. This is a fight that really interests me. I mean, it's two young killers, but I think whoever wins this fight is going to take that next step. What say you?
Absolutely. No, this is a great fight as well as a late addition to the card. The UFC kind of wanted to beef up the lineup a little bit, and they kind of put this one together on short notice, but it's a good one. As you said, D-Rod's got a lot of hype behind him, but Kevin Holland, I think for a little bit we thought, okay, is this guy really taking the sport serious, or is he more into just kind of having fun? He's a great personality, right? Which there's something to be said for that. This sport of mixed martial arts is not just about wins and losses. It's about entertaining and getting people to want to watch and to tune in. And I think there was a thought for a little bit, is Kevin Holland really taking this serious or not? Yeah, he's taking it serious. I mean, he really, really is. And this is a big fight for both these guys as well, in a big spot on the main card. I like this fight a lot. Catch weight of 180 pounds. So that because it was put together on short notice, they're not having to cut all the way down. We'll see if that changes anything at all. But this is a key fight here for both these guys.
All right, instead of UFC 279, I'm gonna nickname this the Redemption card, because opening fight on the main card, okay, is somebody that everybody was tremendously excited about, right? He could have been the next John Jones. He could have been whatever. Now coming off of 4 out of 5 losses, which is Johnny Walker. And Johnny Walker, if you guys never watched him fight, he is fun as hell to watch fight. And that one win out of his 5 with Ryan Superman Spann, I mean, the guy can fight. He's just, he took one of the most vicious fall knockouts that I've seen in a long time. And it was weird. He got hit on the top of the head. I don't know where you come back from that, but he is fun to watch, and he opens up the main card.
He is, and he's going against another guy who is very fun to watch as well, and Iwan Kutalaba, who's just an absolute, just psychopath. They call him the Hulk. He used to come out in that green paint, for the ceremonial weigh-ins, and but I mean, just a devastating puncher as well, and powerful dude. He's going to make it great. This fight should be nuts. As long as it lasts, it's going to be nuts. I do not expect it to go 15 minutes because both these guys are wild. But yeah, with Johnny Walker, it's tough, right? He's one of those guys that came into the UFC and just had this incredible run right off the top, right? You're talking about comes off the Contender Series, then gets 3 performance of the night bonuses in a row, 3 first-round finishes. And that's the thing, is that the expectations became so high. It's almost – it wasn't to the level of Khamzat Chimaev, but it's kind of that kind of thing where you're like, oh, this dude can't be stopped. This dude can't be beaten. It's like, nah, he's a human being just like anybody else. You punch him in the chin in the right place, he goes down. And so, those expectations became through the roof. Again, because of his size and how big he is in the division, a lot of people were saying, like, oh, maybe this is the guy to unseat John Jones. John's always a bit taller and longer and rangier than his opponent, 205 pounds. So his expectations got so high, and then he had a couple of setbacks. As you said, 4 or 5, it hasn't looked good. And this is a big moment for him as well. I like what you're saying. There's redemption stories here all the way around. Johnny Walker, I think, same thing. Maybe not to the spot of Tony Ferguson where you're talking about, is it time to be done? But, he's just 30 years old. But, you might say, is it time to stop, talking about his future and looking at this guy as a potential contender? And again, Iwan Kutalaba, He's had his share of setbacks as well. But, also against some tough guys, Ryan Spann, Magomed Ankalaev, Glover Teixeira, those losses, Jared Cannonier. So, I mean, some big names in there as well. But these two dudes are wild, man. They're both aggressive. They're both powerful. Again, I don't think this fight lasts very long, but it's a big one for both guys moving forward.
All right. So we, wrapping up, previewing UFC 279 this weekend, but with Nate Diaz's last fight on his contract, just announced he's getting into the promotion game. Real Fight Inc. Now, I know that you sat down with, or you had some talks with part of, Team Diaz. What'd you hear about this?
Yeah, it was interesting. So Team Diaz kind of made the announcement yesterday, which I thought was kind of wild. They were making an announcement on a Sunday, but clearly they want to get ahead of the curve for this final fight week and use it smart. I mean, that's business 101 right now. Your guy Nate Diaz is going to have the spotlight all week this week at UFC 279. Why not go ahead and announce the next move for him, which is getting into the promotion game? As you said, Real Fight Inc., real ninjas, real fighters, real S is their tagline. I love it. They want to do boxing. They want to do MMA. They want to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And it's smart. Now, important to point out, doesn't even have a promoter's license yet, right? So this is not imminently happening.
Right.
From what we're hearing. But, Dana White said, listen, if he beats Khamzat Chimaev, you got to consider him into the title picture. Dana told me that. And so, that would, of course, entail him signing a new contract. But if you put him in a title shot, maybe he likes the number of zeros that are on that deal. So, I mean, there's a lot happening here. So will this Real Fight Inc., will it just be, another addition to kind of the regional game, like a CFSC that's trying to develop up-and-coming fighters? As he said, he wants to do boxing and grappling. Or will it be a promotional vehicle for him to go do something on his own? There's been a lot of talk about him going and boxing Jake Paul moving forward, and that could be a huge money generator. You never know. I mean, obviously we saw Conor McGregor do the same thing, right? He came out with McGregor Sports and Entertainment so that he had his own promotional vehicle for his own boxing match with Floyd Mayweather. Now, again, the UFC was involved in that as well. So where this ends up ultimately going, we don't know yet. I mean, but it's smart to go ahead and say, hey, let's get this out there. Let's get this let's start get some interest in our brand and start building some attention behind it. So great timing on his. We'll see ultimately what it means.
Let's give Nate Diaz the credit he deserves. While everybody's playing chess or playing checkers, he's been playing chess for a long damn time. I mean, even into getting that McGregor fight years back. I mean, he set the seeds for that. And this guy, contrary, he may be the gangster from Stockton, the guy smoking weed at press conferences or when USADA's coming up, but he's also laying groundwork, and he is a tremendously intelligent individual.
Listen, the quote he gave me about this was, the best fighters in the world aren't the ones they tell you. It's the real fighters who know how to put on a show, and that's what we're going to do. And he's right about that, right? Nate and his brother, Nick Diaz, have put themselves in such a unique position in the sport, right? Because the Diaz brothers, no matter who they announce to fight, you're going to want to watch it and tune in. And it's like, I don't care how many wins or losses. I don't care. And I've always said this, and I think this is 100% true. Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor could each be on 10-fight losing streaks. And you put them together for that trilogy fight, you're selling 1 million pay-per-views, period. Because people don't care with those guys about the rankings, about where they stand, about are they challenging for a title. They know if I tune in to watch that guy fight, he's going to put on a damn show for me. I know that even though he's facing the killer in Khamzat Chimaev, he ain't going away. He's gonna push to the end. Listen, that's what the Diaz brothers have built for themselves, and it's unique in the sport. Not a lot of people can say that, where it doesn't matter who they're fighting. You want to tune in to watch them fight.
Absolutely, and I hopefully I'm an honorary member of the Nick Diaz army. But last thing before we get wrapping up, something really, really cool happened at UFC Fight Night Paris, and that was a cutaway shot of George St. Pierre and Kamaru Usman sitting together watching the fight. Now, it begs the question, whether they did this intentionally or not to get us pundits start talking or not, who is the welterweight GOAT? I think when you look at it objectively, Kamaru Usman had the tougher road, absolutely, but times are different. George St. Pierre was the trailblazer, and maybe you're too close with both of these guys that you don't want to put yourself in this position. But I have to ask, as the man in this industry that you are, who is the welterweight GOAT? Is it Kamaru Usman or is it George Rush St. Pierre?
To me, it's about length and dominance, right? Over time. And to me, it's the number of title defenses, and that's George St. Pierre. You know what I mean? And so, listen, Kamaru Usman, I love Kamaru Usman, man. I got a chance to call some fights with him early on in his career at Titan Fight. We did a couple broadcasts together, so got to know him there. Met him behind the scenes and talked to him. He's a great dude. I really enjoy, and I think he's a phenomenal fighter. But the thing is, I think it's difficult to have that advantage. Kamaru Usman's not done yet, right? I mean, he just had this setback, of course. Now the trilogy fight with Leon Edwards is going to be incredible, and he could easily win back that title and then could start another run. And when he's done, I think Kamaru Usman absolutely has the potential to be the greatest of all time. Had he, beaten Anderson Silva's record of most consecutive victories in the UFC, that would be an interesting conversation to have. I mean, if the guy is the most ever of any, I mean, you've got to. So for me right now, I still lean ever so slightly towards George St. Pierre, but you got to remember Kamaru Usman's not done yet. So the story has not been completely written just yet.
And I don't think any fighter in our lifetime has had the admiration of everybody that a George St. Pierre has. But it's just this is what we do. It's fun to talk about. What would we talk about if we didn't talk about these, completely trivial things of whether, on the level of greatness, the two greatest, who's greater, right? And I don't know. But to your point, right now, I firmly believe that George St. Pierre is the greatest of all time. But it's Kamaru Usman. You cannot argue with what he has done, and you cannot argue with the potential that he still has moving forward.
It's still there, but it's so funny. It's like you said, like when you talk about who's the greatest, female pound for pound fighter right now, and I always think it's like a disservice to like say Amanda Nunes or Valentina Shevchenko. When you're talking about people that are that great, you know what I mean? You're splitting hairs to go 1 or 2. I mean, it's almost a disservice to put somebody at 2. It's almost like 1A and 1B. You know what I mean? Like they're both right there. So it's splitting hairs for me. But again, to me, the thing I always look at, and I don't even look at, to me, when I factor in the greatest of all time in the welterweight division, I don't even look at, the fact that George St. Pierre is a 2-division champion, right? He did win that. But to me, winning really, coming and winning that one title defense, the middleweight title against Michael Bisping and then never defending it, I don't even really factor that in. To me, it's the fact that, you look at the records of like most wins in the welterweight division, most title defenses in the welterweight division, all those things. To me, it's divisional dominance. When you can dominate a division over time, and then people have the argument of like, yeah, but the guys weren't as good. Yes, they were. They were just as good. It was a different era. That's like taken away from Hoist Gracie and being like, yeah, he was beating guys, but they weren't that good. They were good for the time. They were good for the time. So you can't say that. It's different eras. But to me, I still lean George St. Pierre, but I want to make it very clear. I think Usman is right there below him. If he comes back, gets this title back, and goes on another run, I think he can absolutely walk away from the sport at some point, making himself the clear greatest of all time in the welterweight division.
Man, this was fun today. I'm really looking forward to UFC 279. We are going to recap that next week. Make sure, check out grindcitymedia.com. You could see these two pretty faces either there or on YouTube. You can also listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Next week, as I said, recapping which gangster comes out with the W, right? We're going to recap that whole card. Where does Tony Ferguson go from there? I'm excited to watch all of this. For John Morgan, I am Eric McMahon, and we will see you next week on Cageside with John Morgan.